I think this is an important part of our beekeeping year. We're going to start with Michelle. She has a few words to say, and then we will move on to Marion.
Okay, as I share a few words here, I'm gonna put them up on the screen so that they become forever part of the legacy, the recording here, because I have a very important message to send out. And that is our thank yous. So our numbers don't appear very big, but we actually have quite a number of members. And a lot of our members are doing work behind the scenes that maybe you don't all get to see. And we hope that if you haven't participated in any kind of way with our organizing committee, that you'll consider it in the future. My first thank you, these are in no particular order, goes to Sheila Miller. She's our treasurer. And it is true that she hasn't had a lot of work to do during the pandemic because we haven't had a lot of events. We know that we have a lot of stuff coming up. I just really want to thank you very much for taking on the position. We really appreciate that you are always there. You're at the ready to sort out any of our financial business. And just want to let you know that we really appreciate that you've joined our committee. My next thank you, it goes to Lucy, who's sitting with you. And she gets all the speakers and everything organized for every meeting. And it's been a lot more difficult during the pandemic because we haven't been able to blue sky as much together to come up with topics and speakers. But regardless, she has managed to track them down and to get them all on board. And it's wonderful. And you know, she's there in person, welcoming everybody. And she has been a huge support for me, especially during the pandemic when it's been really hard. We weren't able to see each other in person. Thank you very much, Lucy. Thank you also to Henry Dillon, who is not there today, I noticed. But we would have withered in the quagmire of technology without Henry. He's always ready. Just a phone call away, solves all of our technological problems, helped us build our website basically for free, gets our Stripe account going, and we have a web upgrade planned in the future, and I know he's there going to be helping us. And so just want to say thank you very much, Henry, for being there. Oliver, thank you. Also, he is the person who helps us get all of our newsletters and messages and everything out to you. Always on the ready. We don't get to see him very much, but thank you, Oliver. My next thank you is to Marion. She is our foundational rock of education. I called her a very quiet but powerful resource. And she keeps our monthly Be Educated sessions fact-filled, timely, and relevant. And she really has just taken us, really keeps us really where we want to be. She created a whole calendar of subjects for the next board to cover, to making sure that we really understand, you know, what topics need to be covered and at what time of the year. And it's just really wonderful. Her husband, Terry, passed away in September 2020, and this was basically, it was his love to do this. I think he really thrived on this portion. And you've really picked up that baton and you do really a superb job, Marion. So thank you very much. Thank you also to Renee Nadeau, who is our meeting minute taker when we have our coordinated committee meetings. And she also has helped on a variety of other projects. Very grounding person and keeps us reoriented and steady. And keeps us reminded of our
there's a lot of stuff that was in there.
More ethical or ecological responsibilities. Thank you also to Kathy David, who is there today and helping out with that technology. I saw you running around. She's our liaison to the University of Toronto, and she secures that absolutely amazing room. And she's just always so happy, cheerful, helpful, supportive. And I said, like the model of hospitality, bringing tea and coffee to every meeting. And you're really wonderful, Kathy. And thank you so much for being part of our team and for helping us out. My last thank you is to Tom Nolan. He's the founder of this group and ran it for many years. And he is always available as a resource to us. And we are really, really grateful for his support and guidance. So big thank you to all of you. You've made such a difference in us over the past couple of years, and you've been really wonderful to work with.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, January, here we come. Marion, let's go ahead with your beekeeping calendar. Oh, I mute you. Sorry.
Can we say thank you to Michelle along the way? Thank you, Michelle, for all your leadership.
Yes, cannot forget that. She's being the driving force to have this go all the way through the pandemic. So we've done very well.
So I'm Marion Whittam, the interim vice chair for the UTBA. And each month I do present the beekeepers calendar. It is available to you online for sure. There's a beautiful 24-page calendar that contains a lot of information. The information that I give kind of expands on that with some extra information and current resources. And if you do need to get a copy of it to arrange shipping, there is the address that the email address that you can send an email.
You're not sharing on my screen, Marion.
Okay, hold on then. One sec.
And she leans back for her technological support.
That's right.
Babies.
You're good.
Multitasking.
Multitasking. Okay. Let's start it again. Here we are. So yes, this UTBA calendar is available here. All you have to do is send an email to this particular address here, and you can get a copy of it if you're a paid up member if the UTBA. It's a lovely, beautiful calendar, but I tend to add a little bit more information to it at all times. My education resources for this month are the OMAFRA website, Best Management Practices for Winter Colonies, the OBA, Where to Buy Bees and What You Need to Know, the Ontario Honeybee Resistance Program, and Culling Frames, Why Do You Do It and How Do You Do It Efficiently? And that's a new article from Colette Mesher of the TTP lead in the OBA Journal on November, and it's very well written and very informative. Other things that you can look at for your education are the YouTube videos by the Honeybee Research Center at the University of Guelph. There's now over 80 videos and they're all excellent. Hard copy resources, some hard copy resources, Honeybees, Biology by Huey Karen, Stories Keeping Bees, and a lot of the tech transfer manuals that you get with courses. During the winter, this is January, during the month of December, we have experienced a variety of weather conditions and temperature fluctuations over 10 degrees some days. For example, last week at our cottage, there was 5 feet of snow and it could hardly get in. You couldn't get in. You really had to get shoveled and had to get the roof load off of the snow. Well, it turned around in 5 days, it rained and the temperatures fell and everything is pretty well gone. So these temperature fluctuations are not only hard on us and our health and trying to figure out what to wear, but it's also very hard on our bees. And our bees are going to be confused as to what may be happening. They may think it's spring because there were some days, just a couple of days ago, that was 14 degrees. So the average temperature should be really around 0, and it should be too cold for to open the hives, and the bees should cluster. But with all this confusion, they may be thinking spring's early. So on a warm day, some bees may be doing their cleansing flight. Expect to see some dead bees outside that hive. But if there's snow, and as you can see here, this is just a picture that we've taken. There's a lot of snow and you have to leave the snow on the hives, but make sure that those entrances and ventilation areas are clear so it doesn't get humidity in there. You might think about cleaning and repairing your equipment and renewing your OBA membership if you've not done so already. The OBA membership, I'm going to talk about the benefits of that and what that means in another slide. And also the OMAFRA certificate of registration. If it's due this year, due in 2022, you should have applied through the portal to get that for yourself. It's free. And then you can use that for your OBA membership to get additional insurance. In the January timeframe, you can set your goals for beekeeping during the beekeeping season and order your supplies if you require any, take an inventory of them. Considering when you get frames now, this is Colette Mesher's idea, and it's an idea, it's a great idea. It's an article that she's written on, and it's a good principle to follow, is rotating your frames. And in your if you buy new frames, to make sure that you put the year on it so that you can rotate it. And she tells you some methods to rotate it when you get to in the spring, when you're working your bees. So that's a really good article if you are an OBA member to read. Our main speaker, Graeme, tonight will be focusing on information about how to choose a bee breeder, what is a nuc, should it contain, what you do when you get it back to the bee yard, and all kinds of really important information. And a reference that you can also use is the OBA website. It has information on how to buy nucs, what about bee breeders, what about the Ontario Honeybee Resistance Program, and what does that mean? So all kinds of good stuff that you can take a look at and study and get yourself ready for the new year of beekeeping. The OMAFRA Beekeeps registration is essential.
Very interesting documentary.
Go ahead. Okay. The OMAFRA Beekeeping Certification Registration, the Bees Act is legislation that requires bees to be regulated in Ontario. And the main purpose of that is to protect the health of the honeybees, and includes the beekeeper, and anyone possessing beekeeping equipment needs to obtain a certificate of registration. A valid registration for all beekeepers is required, and a proof of registration is needed for permits, funding programs to receive honeybee inspection service from MAFRA and the OBA liability insurance. It's free. Beekeepers whose certificate is expiring this year required to submit a new registration. New beekeepers also need to do that, and there's more information on the MAFRA site. The OBA membership, excuse me, is very important. It saves you money on workshops and meetings and conferences and subscriptions and journals, the OBA journal and the Honey Council journal. It protects you and your assets by offering you the affordable bee and honey related liability insurance, but you need to have that OMAFRA registration of your hives to get that. The OBA is working hard in 2023 for the renewals to get ready for their current membership. And in fact, that has gone out to all members, and it's a very easy process now. They send you a link. They have your profile. If your certificate needs to be renewed, you send them their certificate from OMAFRA that you've got renewed, and they put that on your profile. So all in all, it's a very easy process. The membership itself is $80, and then there's various categories of beekeepers, what beekeepers needs, whether you're small beekeeper, commercial beekeeper, mead maker, all of those in that, and you get to choose what you want for your profile, and they will work with you. But my OMAFRA certificate took my 6 weeks to get, and then after that, the OBA just registered that. And just to let you know that Michelle Wilson, one of our UTBA chair and member of the OBA board, is also the chair of the Communication Strategy Committee. And we're going to have our third meeting for OBA volunteer members on January 10th by Zoom. And Michelle has a working group who will review the existing OBA modes of communication and then focus on continuous improvement of the OBA communications for the next 5 years. And I'm participating in that working group. And just to let you know that there's a free biosecurity workshop, which should be interesting, on the 18th and 25th of January. It's hosted through the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And beekeepers are invited to attend this online workshop to learn more about biosecurity, about best management practices, learn how to identify any gaps in your processes, and develop a biosecurity plan. The workshop is free. It takes place over 2 nights, the 18th and 25th, for 2 hours each time, for 7 till 9, and you can sign up online. And it looks like a really, really interesting workshop. And that's it for me for the beekeepers calendar. Winter is here. enjoy your time off and remain and be well. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. Backing up here.
Resistant honeybee selection program, which is ORBS. Graeme has been keeping bees for 11 years and now has a 200 hive operation under the name Lost Meadows Apiaries. Along with honey, Graeme also sells queens and nucs he produces and opened a meadery under the name of Lost Meadows Meadery with his sister last year. He's an active member of the ORBS program, and Lost Meadows queens are bred for hygienic and LVG behavior, which you're going to explain, as well as other desirable traits like gentleness and honey production. Welcome, Graeme.
Okay, thank you. Just speak through this room. Okay, we're good.
This one.
Just speak through there. Okay, can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up, cool. Okay, I'll share my screen here.
You're sharing it from your computer?
Yeah. Share screen.
It's usually down at the bottom, but sometimes if you scroll down.
All right, give me 1 second.
It's on a big table.
Joking around. There we go.
Oh, you're just looking to find it.
It just says, it's just jumping into there.
Yeah, it's below too.
There we go. Okay, I have to quit real. Right back. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Oh, it's just gotta let me go.
Sorry, Jean.
Oh, I just need to be let in.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry.
Okay. Got it.
Just wanted to remind you all that we have a YouTube channel set up. It's called the Urban Toronto Beekeepers, and you can find all of our meetings on that YouTube channel. So you can go back if you missed any information. And we're ready to go.
Okay, sorry about that small technical glitch there. So there we go. Okay. So first off, we'll start with what is a nuc and the main parts you need. So nuc just stands for nucleus colony. So the main thing to know when you're buying a nuc is you're not buying a full-size beehive. You are buying the components that is needed to put into a hive body that will turn into a full-size beehive. Also, the hive bodies are not provided. So the most important thing when buying a nuc is that you already have your hive bodies. And so what you're going to get are bees, frames, and the queen. And our Ontario standard is a 4-frame nuc. Lots of other places like in the States do sell 5-frame nukes, but here 4-frame is what our standard is. So the parts of a nuke, you have, of course, the queen bee. Then you're going to be looking for 2 frames of brood, 1/2 to 2/3 capped with adhering bees. When beekeepers making up a nuke, they shouldn't be putting in capped brood that is going to be close to hatching. And the biggest risk with that is your nuke can overheat. So when I'm going through looking for nukes, I'm looking for all its capped brood pupae in the white to pink eye stage to give them a few days to be in the hive before they hatch for risk of overheating. And then the other thing that is extremely important is your food frame. And that is not just honey, it has to be honey and pollen because we know larvae don't eat honey. And so you need all that pollen in there so that they can really kickstart the brood rearing without going out and having to collect that pollen. And then the last thing is there's going to be an empty frame, which in Ontario most commonly is an empty, deep honey super frame from the year prior that the beekeeper had drawn out. And that is going to be in there so that the queen has immediate space to lay. And then, of course, you want bees covering all frames and some extra. So the photo on the left here is an example of a frame that could be placed into a nuke. You want that many bees on the frames when you pull them out and more. You want lots. And if I'm making a nuke, I'm putting 3 frames in with bees on them and shaking an additional 1 to 2 frames in. So I'm putting extras, and you really need those extras to make sure it works. If you buy a nuke and there's not a lot of bees, that's not very good. So I don't know, you do what you will with that, but try to make sure they have a good amount of bees. And when to order nukes, right now really is a great time if beekeepers haven't gotten them up yet, very soon. Not all the time, but definitely sometimes beekeepers sell out of nukes by May. And so when the snow's out is when the time to think about that. As the previous speaker had mentioned, it's your planning phase. And then just so you know, beekeepers are going to ask for a deposit or just, a simple full payment beforehand. And often that's non-refundable as well. Yeah. Now, the next question is, who do you buy from? So, I didn't put this on here, but location is ideal. If you can go not too far and get one, that's great. But really, are they a queen and nuke producer or are they a supply store? So the main difference with that is, are they the people that actually went in, made the nuke? Are you kind of buying it right from the person that made it, or are you buying it from a supply store that purchased wholesale nukes from a nuke maker? And I think the difference with that is just knowing who, if you do have an issue with the nuke, who you can kind of go back to ask about and hold accountable for that. Obviously, they all need to have a valid queen and nuke permit from OMAFRA. That's not anything to do with the OBA. That's to do with OMAFRA, just knowing where the bees are being sold. And then after those decisions, you can kind of get into other more advanced ones, which might be difficult if you're a first-year beekeeper to understand, but are they an ORBS member? So now you're starting to think of more like disease resistance, things like that. I shouldn't have said difficult to understand, but just a lot to think about in your first year. So those are all sort of things to consider. And when are nukes ready? So the biggest thing that we're trying to do is, as a beekeeper that is making nukes, is we need to have queens to replace into the hives that we are removing. So nukes with imported queens, so meaning queens are coming likely from California or Italy, are usually ready, mid-May to June 1st. That's not the exclusive time they're sold, but around that date is when they're ready. Nukes with Ontario overwintered queens are usually ready between June 1st and June 15th. In Ontario, we can't really make queens before June, just with the fact that drones aren't flying yet. That's the other component. We can graft as much as we want. We don't have the drone flight. Keep in mind, Ontario is extremely diverse. And so if you're, in maybe down in the Niagara region, you probably could get one earlier than that. It also depends on the beekeeper. If the beekeeper is replacing with just cells, or if they're replacing with mated queens, that's going to push back their availability on when they have resources to go with. And then, sorry, will the queen? I'll answer some questions at the end. And then nukes with this year's Ontario queens are usually ready mid-June onwards. So similar time frame to the overwintered ones. It's just they have to wait for them to mate. So personally, in my operation, I prefer to install mated queens back into my hives. So I tend to be more that mid-June range. Yeah, and then this is just a little video of a virgin queen hatching, just to kind of show what we're all waiting for. So there she is. Nice big queen, and she's a really light color right now, but as her skeleton hardens, she'll actually turn pretty dark there. So there we go. So now we're going to get into the components of the nukes. And so the queen is the mother of the hive, and she's also basically what dictates every single other characteristic of the hive, because it's based on her own genes and then the genetics of the drone bees that she mated with. So when you're buying a nuke, you need to sort of ask, are you getting a local queen? So if you're getting, you would want to get a queen that's more adapted to your area. The beekeeper has good success overwintering, all those things, maybe potentially rather than getting an imported queen. That's a decision you can make. And if the queen is imported, do you know where? Do you know where the breeder is and what they're doing? Out down in California, basically all of our queens from California come from Oliveras or in Italy. Is the queen already accepted? So you should not buy a nuke that the queen has not been accepted. That's would be sort of not the best thing for the beekeeper selling you to do. It should be an accepted queen. And the next thing is she caged or uncaged? A caged queen is much better. So even if she's accepted by the hive, even though she is accepted by the hive, when we're making the nukes, we cage her so that she doesn't get damaged in transport or when you're putting the frames out. So even though she's 100% accepted queen, we're going to put her in there literally for protection of transport, and it makes it easier for you when you're installing the nuke. Also, is she marked or unmarked? Typically, they probably are marked. All of mine are marked, but it does take time to mark them. So sometimes you'll get an unmarked queen, and it's not really going to be a big deal. So it might be a bit more difficult for you to locate her. And also you won't know if your queen's been replaced. So the main thing with marking queens is if we're running a breeding line or breeding stock, we need to make sure it's the same queen in there and that she hasn't been, superseded or swarmed. And now we're assuming genetics that were in there and not knowing that it is 100% the queen. And then the other difference is she an overwintered queen or is she this year's? Standard procedure is to sell once overwintered queen. However, I don't think there's too big of a difference between an overwintered or this year's queen. In my opinion, if you're buying from an established breeder, the likelihood of them selling queens that can overwinter is pretty small. You're going to be able to find some good breeders, and especially ones that are part of the Orbs program that'll be able to sell you new this year queens, not virgin queens, not queens that aren't accepted. They've been accepted, but there's just this year's queen, and they should be able to make it through the winter. But the standard is to buy an overwintered queen already. So the genetics of your nuke. So this is going back to the queen again, and this is where some questions can be a little bit more complex. So are you buying an imported queen? What is their breeding program? Are you buying an Orbs breeder or a breeder that is breeding for some disease resistance? And then if so, what are they breeding for? So is it hygienic behavior, LVG, which stands for low varroa growth, gentleness, overwintering, or honey production? So if you are a new beekeeper and you are not 100% concerned about your bees making 200 pounds of honey, you're not too concerned about, you know, low varroa growth, you're gonna treat them, monitor, then maybe you want to look for a breeder that is focused, you know, extremely on gentleness. And then, you know, just because that might make the barrier of inspecting your hives a little bit less. So there's all kinds of options that you can look at and all kinds of things that you can review when you're buying a nuke. So this is a video. If we have time, I can show. This is Dan Borges. He's from the tech transfer program here in Ontario. And this is him explaining hygienic testing on my bee yard up north. Let's see, there's volume here.
Today. So the first step is to do.
Oh, okay, so there's no, sorry, I don't know why it won't, the volume won't work there, but anyways, basically, I'll just pause here. So I'll just explain this really quickly. So this is a frame of capped brood. You can see Dan's actually gone through and uncapped quite a few. You can see the white heads there. And so what we're looking for is the right age larvae, or sorry, pupae to freeze. So if it's too young, if it's a larvae, they overinflate their hygienic behavior. And if they are too old, then the liquid nitrogen doesn't work. And just a simple hive tool, we just pop the capping off for Michelle's question there. And then in this video here, we don't necessarily need volume for this, but basically you can see, so we place these collars and then Dan's pouring liquid nitrogen into them there. So the collars are between 35 or 45 bees, depending on the set they use. And what they're doing is killing the bees under there. And then we're going to measure how quickly in 24 or how many in 24 hours get uncapped and also removed. It's two different characteristics, the uncapping versus the removing. So we track both. And then, so we put that frame back in for 24 hours and bring it out. And hopefully we see this. So you can see this isn't that exact frame, but it was a frame done previously. So this hive had 100% exhibited a hygienic kind of score of 100% uncapping and 100% removal in 24 hours. And things like that are going to really help you out in reducing brood related diseases such as chalk brood, sac brood, European foul brood, which is popping up more and more in Ontario now, and American foul brood. Keep in mind, this is not a replacement for antibiotics. If you're looking to use antibiotics, it's just simply sort of like the hive might be a bit more healthy overall, or honestly, definitely would be more healthy overall. You're able to remove the dead and dying larvae and pupae. And honestly, when you do go through and test a bunch of bees, if you do, test a bunch of hives, or if I'm looking to find new breeders, I often find some that aren't 100% hygienic. They might have only uncapped half or something. And so really the hygienic ones really do make a big difference, and they can be a good idea if you're looking to get bees to buy them from an OPS breeder. The other thing with hygienic behavior, this freeze kill liquid nitrogen, is it has no effect on varroa. So it's not a mechanism for monitoring any type of varroa resistance. The varroa resistance that we know of is varroa sensitive hygiene and SMR, or the grooming behavior. And so what we're doing now in the ORBS program, since I've become chair, is we're now incorporating the low varroa growth test, which Dr. Guzman confirmed is an accurate test to measure those mechanisms. And basically we take a varroa sample at the beginning of the summer and a varroa sample, mid-August. Any of the hives we're testing cannot be manipulated. We can't pull nukes. They're not treated for mites in that time. And then we're tracking the mite growth, and then we're breeding from the ones with the lowest mite growth. So if you sample a yard of 10 hives and, you know, they all start off at 0 out of a 300 score. And then at the end, they have, you know, some of them have, say, 10 out of 300, they're at treatment threshold, but a few of them only have 3 out of 300, then you're going to breed from those 3 out of 300. That's a 1%, you know, growth. And then we're going to move on to the next year and test the daughter. And so we've just been doing that for the last 3 years. And yeah, so the average nuke price in Ontario has gone up in the last few years. It's sitting around 250. This is sort of what I'm forecasting this year to be. I think last year was more like 235, but I think it's going to go up to close to around 250 this year. And it really depends on the individual breeder and sellers. If you're looking to get a pure buckfast strain, then that's going to be probably a little bit higher, maybe upwards of 3 to 325, I last heard. But if you're getting like Ontario bred queens, they're going to be around 250. If you're getting the imported queens, they might be a bit less. And just, you know, the price of the nukes, I put more expensive nukes are not always better. It's just sort of just saying like beekeepers sort of, we have a kind of an average price that we set, but it doesn't always mean the more expensive ones are the best, and it doesn't mean that the cheapest ones are the worst. It's just sort of based on the type of work that beekeeper is doing and what they kind of need to charge for the nukes.
What does nuke stand for?
Nuke stands for nucleus colony.
And people buy them?
So transporting your nuke. So when you transport your nuke, so you've gone to the beekeeper, you picked it up. It's going to come in a nuke box, which I'll show after this presentation. But you want to put it ideally in your vehicle. And, you know, don't put, if you have a pickup truck, don't put it in your back of your pickup truck with a black bed liner on a hot sunny day, because you'll cook your nuke. The biggest issue with nukes is temperature control. So they can't get too cold and they can't get too warm. So you're going to want to put them in your vehicle, you know, maybe in your back seat with the frames pointing forward. And so that's if you accelerate or put your brakes on, the frames aren't swaying and crushing bees. You want them to be straight. And, you know, it's really hot with the AC on, but don't feel like you need to make it a fridge in there. Just nice, you know, whatever temperature you're comfortable at is perfect. And once you get home, I wouldn't open them up right away. They're going to be a little bit riled up from the drive. So you can let them settle down for upwards of a day. I wouldn't leave it more than a day. You want to get them out of there and into your hive, and they're not in there in an environment like a normal beehive, like I said, where they can regulate the temperature. So most nukes are picked up in the evening. So if you bring them home in the evening, you know, put them somewhere. If you get them early June, you can have nights almost down to 6. It's too cold for the nuke. So you're going to need to put it in your house. And then you're going to want to put it in the next morning. If you pick it up in the morning, go home, you know, let them settle down for a few hours and install them that afternoon if possible. So installing your nuke. So the biggest thing is you want to have your hive, your location, everything all ready before you go and pick it up. Don't go pick up your nuke and then bring all your stuff home. Especially if you have to build. You don't want to go home and then have to build your boxes or anything. Like, have that all done, you know, and then have the location picked out as well. And as soon as you open the nuke, or maybe when you go to buy it, you can ask, is the queen caged? Because if the queen's caged and you accidentally crush a few bees, it's sad, but it's not terrible. If the queen is not caged, you have to be extremely careful in walking around with your nuke or transporting your nuke, because nuke boxes aren't the most sturdy thing, and the frames can sometimes move around, and you don't want to crush your queen, especially being a new beekeeper, not realizing you did, and then kind of a few weeks go by and you have a problem, and it's going to be a bit hard to get your colony back up and running. So when you open a box, you're going to look, is the queen caged? If you haven't already asked, are there lots of bees? You want to see lots of bees all over the frames. And what you're going to do is if the queen's caged, you're going to take her out, never, ever, ever place her in direct sunlight. So put her in the shade. You put her in direct sunlight, she can honestly cook very quickly. Like, especially if you ever put a cage queen on a hive lid, she'll be dead in about 10 seconds. Even if queens don't die, if they heat over a certain temperature, all of her sperm becomes unviable, and so you can have a living queen with no viable sperm. So you're going to take the frames out and you're going to place them back in the middle of the box the same way they came out of the nuc. And so you're going to want to place the 2 brood frames together with the queen in the middle between them if she's caged, and then place the food frame on the one side and the empty frame on the other. And at this point in time, feeding is optional. I can show a little way to feed later, but just whatever you do, make sure when you look down through your inner opening, if that's what you have, you can't see the queen. Because if you put a feeder upside down and sugar syrup drips all over her, then that would be bad. So I like to place her a little bit towards the back half of the hive. And this is just an example of, so there's a queen in the cage there. This is probably exactly what will happen when you place her back in the hive. All of the bees will run over and tend to her. And yeah, so I guess I should have mentioned also at this point in time, you have a queen caged and you feel confident, you can place all the frames back and then just release the queen out of the cage. I do that quite often myself. But if you're sort of nervous, then just place her in there and they'll chew the cane. Okay, so you've installed your nuc. You have everything's good. You came back and you're going to want to come back and do your first inspection in about a week to 10 days. And it's really like, just don't leave it. Don't come back in 4 days and don't come back in 3 weeks, but come back when you can. I know a lot of people keep bees that aren't on their property. And so, it might be tough to do a schedule. So if you can only keep bees on weekends and you want to go, you got your nuc the one weekend and you want to go the next weekend to see them, that's fine. And what you're going to do is if you put the queen in and she was caged, you're going to open up your hive and make sure that she's come out of the cage. If she's not out of the cage, so if the candy is too hard or something, you're going to want to just release her and let her go in there. And you're also going to want to see that bees are starting to build on the foundation if food was provided. So if you gave them some sugar syrup, you're going to feed 1-to-1 sugar syrup at this point in the year, not 2-to-1. You should see them starting to just sort of dust or like at least make the foundation bite if you have black foundation. And another thing that is sort of in here, it's not exactly to do with the first inspection, but if you have a nuc and then all of a sudden there's an extremely strong nectar flow and the queen can't keep up, and meaning that because there's not much space in your nuc, the bees, whatever cells are built, the bees are packing with honey and not giving her space. You want to move those honey frames to the outside once the flow is done, or if you see that they're starting to build but haven't filled with honey, move those in so that she has space to lay. It's not necessarily an issue with the queen. It's just a circumstance of their environment where they don't have a lot of space to put resources, and the nectar flow is so strong that they're packing in the nectar versus not collecting any nectar and letting the queen lay. So just be conscious of that. You can manipulate some of the frames, but just don't do it right away because you want to make sure that the bees can keep that brood that's in the middle nice and warm. Okay, so super in your hive. This is a photo of, I worked at a commercial operation for a year. This is Chatsworth honey. We loaded, I don't know, all of my supers I had at the time into one truck and put them on in one day. And that was my entire operation. So I took a photo. But, so super in your hive is going to be dependent on a few things. The first one is going to be, are you going to run a single or a double brood chamber? And I'm referencing deeps specifically. I would highly recommend running a single deep brood chamber. Running a double is quite heavy. It's hard to lift off that double, that second box, honestly. And there's so many. Most big operations now really run singles unless they're doing pollination and their contracts require a double. So if you're running a single, then you're obviously going to be souping much earlier. You're going to need to use a queen excluder, but you might be supering, quickly, within July, you'll be putting your first super on. But the thing is to not super too early. And so there's sort of a guide where you kind of think of, is it 80% full? So if you're running a 10 frame deep as your brood chamber, you want to wait until like at least, 6 or 7 frames are full of bees and they're starting to work on those outside ones. If you are you've come to your bee yard and you have your honey super, there's like 6 to 7 frames with bees and you're not going to make it back, you should put the super on. If it's in your backyard, you could wait a week and go and put it on. And what I would recommend is taking fully drawn frames with mostly honey and moving them to the outside and bringing those foundation frames into slot 3 and 7. And what that'll do is encourage them to build on that. Sometimes the bees won't build on the foundation on the outside 2 frames. So sort of at this point in time, you're going to be checking your brood chamber and just helping them organize a bit because they don't realize the honey super is coming. It's also going to be based on, you might not, if it's your first year beekeeping, you might not know the nectar flow cycles in your area, but there often is a dearth early August. So you can put a super on, and when you come back, there might not be any honey in it because they just haven't had the resources to build. So just be conscious and just give them, let them do their thing. And also, right now, this is going to be a really important time to do a disease inspection. So being a beekeeper, you're also kind of like a bee doctor or a bee nurse. You're going to sort of be checking on and seeing what's going on. Is the larvae look good? Are they nice and white? Or some of the capped cells uncapped and there's something funny looking in there? You need to be checking at these points in time to see. Also, because when you buy a nuke from a beekeeper, not every single hive is inspected for that beekeeper biomafra. So, when I get my queen and nuke permit, it's on a 2-year cycle. And also they just come and inspect 10% of my apiaries that I'm selling from, and not even actually, to be honest. So it's not like the nuke that you're buying has been gone through by a bee inspector. And hopefully the beekeeper did a good job thoroughly inspecting the hive, but sometimes diseases just aren't expressed in the springtime. And so this is a time when you need to check not only to see if you've gotten a disease from another beekeeper around you, but did a disease come through the nuke? And so this is sort of an important time. This is probably going to be sometime in July if you've got your nuke in June.
What's the difference between a single and a double brood chamber?
I will explain that after with my box here. Break
okay.
that down and I'll explain it.
Okay.
Okay, so what to expect? So this is my niece in my bee yard with her fox. And it's really to show that bees are just really fun and rewarding, and all your friends will want to come see your bees. You'll probably go have morning coffees with them for the first little while. And, don't be nervous. It is a big commitment. I often tell people it's not like getting a dog. It's like more like you are not only responsible for your bees, but other bees in your area. And it's a hard concept to grasp, but your bees are flying 3 kilometers. Some bees 6 kilometers away are flying 3 kilometers, and they're commingling on flowers. And I know there's research being done on some things like that right now, but basically you are responsible also for the general bee health in your area. So just be a good beekeeper, inspect your hives, don't just buy a hive and leave them out back, make sure you check them. And other than that, with a single brood chamber, you can expect a box or 2 of honey come in the first year. And this is obviously dependent on, the weather that year and where you are, but you definitely will be getting into some honey. And so with that, I should have written on here, but you need to prepare for what to do with it. You either need an extractor, or maybe someone in your local group has like Sometimes they'll do a group extraction day where you can all bring your honey, but that is definitely something you need to think of, because in the fall, you have to get that honey off right away and you can't leave it on wondering what to do. So just have plans for that. In July, start to think, what am I going to do with the honey, because you broke it out. And check your bees regularly to make sure they have enough space. I have been beekeeping bees for a little while, like 11 or coming to my 12th year, and I am still surprised by this sometimes, where you go, everything looks good, and you go back 2 weeks later, they've swarmed and they exploded and they made 2 boxes of honey. Like, it's hard. So I'm getting much better at it now, but understanding when your hive's going to explode with the amount of capped brood that's in your hive. If you go through and it's all capped, give them space. They are going to need it, and they will swarm if they don't have it. So that's really that there. And the last one is to treat your nuke for mites in the fall. I have a video in here, but the volume's not working, so I won't be able to show it, but it was a video on how to do a mite wash. So after this, maybe I'll send it to Lucy or something if they want to also put it up, just so that everyone can see. I did a detailed video of how to do a mite wash there. So I made a little calendar here. Don't hold me to this, but this is just an idea of what you would expect for your first year. For first little bee season. So from May to June 1st, this is really when you're going to make sure all your woodenware is ready and hive locations prepped. And if you pick your June nuke up mid-June, you're going to sort of pick it up, say June 15th, and you can put some feed on it if desired. And then 1 week to 10 days later, you're going to go back, do your first inspection, like I had mentioned, check the queen and everything. And if the feeder is empty, you can just pull it off. The biggest thing that I don't love feeding too much this late in the spring. I will feed nukes if I make up nukes, but I only like to give them one and then make sure they use it all. You just don't want them to store that sugar syrup and then move it up into a honey super when they make more space for the queen. So don't keep feeding them and overfeed them. And also, you don't want to create a situation where they're packing all of that sugar syrup in the cells that the queen should be laying in. You want way more brood than honey in your brood box. So you don't want to create like a false sense of a huge nectar flow and not give the queen space. So if you got your hive mid-June, you're going to be back sometime, maybe July 7th. It's your second nail inspection. And your bees should be building out your foundation. Pull off your feeder. If it was a few days of rain in there and there was still feed in it, then you had left it. Pull it off now. And there's an option for a super if you had pulled a feeder previously, or if it doesn't look they've stored anything and they're really building like crazy. You might be getting to almost a month since you've installed the nuke. There is an option to put a super on. If not, then the next inspection, so between the latter half of July, you're going to be putting a super on, and at that point in time, a disease check if you didn't do one in the previous inspection. Now it's August, so this is when you're going to want to do a mite wash. You want to do your mite wash to check for mites in August because you get a more accurate number of what's going on in your hive. By the time you start doing mite washes in September, you can actually have overinflated results because they're shrinking the brood chamber. So there is nowhere for those phoretic mites to go. So there's more mites on the back. And so all of the treatment thresholds are sort of based on an even number of 20% on the back and 80% under the cappings. And what you might start to shift to is more like 50% phoretic and 50% under the cappings. So you might get a bit of an overinflated mite number. So August 1st to 15th, you're going to do your mite wash if you can, and you're going to do a brood inspection, so check for disease, and you really want all frames to be built out in the brood chamber. So if you supered your hives, there is still some space. Make sure you move the outside ones in if you didn't already to make sure they're built. You need all 10 frames in a single story hive to be built out for winter, or if you're just running 9 and all. So then at the end of August, and also if you supered early and they built it, you have an option for a second super. You still have a few weeks of nectar flow, so you can put a second super on. By the latter half of August, if you haven't done your mite wash, do your mite wash now. Do they have enough space? So it's sort of getting a bit late to super, but if they're totally full, you might want to put another super on because you don't want them to be plugged up with all of that golden rod nectar. And if you're at treatment thresholds, you can start to do a formic acid treatment. I treat my hives with mites, my hives with mites with formic, and I often start this at the end of August. And obviously, Tom Nolan is probably the foremost expert on what to do with that, but I know he also does start in August as well. So you can start at that point in time. And now we come around to September, which in my mind is like one of the most important beekeeping months, because you need to pull off your supers and you need to get on your chemical treatments if you're going to use chemical treatments. And that's in the form of Apivar or Apistan or Baverol. Those cannot be put on with honey on the hive. So you need to get your supers off so that you can get those treatments on, because they're a 42-day treatment. And so that means that you need to go in 42 days later to remove those strips. So do that 1st to 15th of September. If you're doing organic, then you actually might be wanting to leave supers on. You always want to treat hives with formic with at least one super on. So you're going to be applying that if you haven't already done so, and then pulling them off. And you're going to start to feed to make sure the hives are heavy enough. Come to October, your mite treatments are done or they've been placed in, and you're just letting the chemical strips do the work, and you're going to be finishing any feeding if needed. I'd like to try, I'm a bit delayed, but Thanksgiving is sort of a big benchmark for me to have most of my hives fully fed. The issue is if you're feeding them, they just can't totally dry that sugar if it's a bit late in the year. But we've been getting warmer and warmer sort of November, so I've been getting away with some stuff, I won't lie, but you want to try to have that done by Thanksgiving. And then October 16th to 31st, you're going to be pulling your chemical strips, or that also goes into early November. So just depending on when that 42-day treatment up, you're going to go in and pull those, and at that point in time, you can do an oxalic acid dribble if desired. So that's going to kill all the heretic mites. Oxalic acid does not penetrate the small cappings. It does nothing to mites underneath. It just kills mites that are exposed on the backs of bees. And you're also going to wrap your hive. And I like to have all that done by mid-November. So that's sort of your first. And then the next year, you're going to obviously start probably in March having a peek at your bees and have a look. But that's sort of what your first 6 months of beekeeping would look like. So then this is the video. It is quite long, so I won't show it, but we'll send this around to the group, and then questions. Go back to stop sharing there. Okay. Sure. And if anyone wants me to go back to slides, if they need me to, I can do that as well, but I'll answer some questions, and then I'll actually just show very briefly how to put a nuke in, just so I can make sense of what I said here. I brought a nuke box and a hive body. So
Would you prefer to do the questions first or your demonstration?
we can do the questions and then I can do the demonstration.
First one is, will the queens supplied be currently laying in the colony if we are getting an imported queen?
Yeah, so that would imply that she's accepted, and that it should be that you're buying an accepted queen. So the queen, even though she's caged, she should be fully accepted by the colony.
How would we know that the queen is not accepted?
If you come back and they've killed her, basically, you can't know. Yeah, the beekeeper, you can ask the beekeeper. I mean, ask the person you're buying the nukes from, and they should tell you like, no, she's 100% accepted. But yeah.
What's your recourse then if your queen is not accepted? You've purchased it, you purchased your nuke and the queen wasn't accepted. is that is that your, is it, how much of responsibility does the seller have to you?
So so that's a great question. I mean, I have never sold a nuke with a non-accepted queen. I think that would be pretty desperate if there was like a year of high losses and people were just, you know, making 2 nukes at the same time out of a hive, and one got the old queen and one got a new queen. If I think it's a question that you could ask, just saying, is this, you know, last year's queen or this year's queen, and is she accepted? Hopefully the beekeeper would be honest with you if they said, oh, she's not accepted. If there's any issues, come back and I'll give you another queen. The recourse would be, you know, if the hive all looks good and the queen wasn't accepted, just a new queen should be provided. If they're not honest with you, might be a bit hard for you to argue against the beekeeper, just if you're a new beekeeper and the more experienced one is not wanting to deal with that situation. But hopefully that's not the case. I just think it's more of a question you can ask to say, is this an already accepted queen? And they should be able to tell you if it's this year's queen or last year's queen, and if she's accepted.
Well, I purchased a nuke this past year, and I bought supposedly an accepted queen. The queen was not accepted. She came caged.
Okay,
she was not accepted.
So what happened? She was caged. You put the cage in your hive body, and then you came back and she'd been killed.
The cage was empty, but no queen.
Okay.
Totally took apart the hive, and we didn't find her. We didn't find her body either.
They would remove the body, so there wouldn't be a body. But do you know if she was marked?
She was marked.
She was? Okay.
Yeah.
And there was no evidence of eggs or larvae or anything when you went through?
No. You know, after 10 days, I didn't, the cage was empty, and I waited another week.
Yes. So you should be saying, because often the issue is it's hard to see the queen. So you're looking for evidence of her there. So you're looking for,
right.
If you are, so now you're, 20 days or whatever post nuke install, she's been out for at least 10.
She was not there.
Ample eggs and ample larvae. Okay.
Right. And but the seller told me that was impossible, basically. But then they sold me a new queen at cost. And the thing is that they were selling these nukes and contacted me in April, early April, to pick up my nuke. So right away, I thought, that's not possible in Ontario. It was supposedly an Ontario-bred queen and nuke. So I don't know what happened there, but you know, clearly.
Obviously, I can't speak to, I don't totally know the circumstance, and I can't speak to the seller or there's no like laws protecting you, to be honest.
Okay.
So I mean, of a nuke sold in April, that's pretty early, obviously. I do know nukes can be sold in May. I overwinter queens. So I mean, like, I have queens available to me pretty early on. And if it's an early season, maybe I have some overwintered queens and can get some nukes out fairly early. But April's pretty early. And yeah, I guess, like, what you can do is just not shop from them again, and just
right.
wanting to buy a nuke, tell them your experience.
Well, the other thing that the other partner in the operation told me was that they'd been experiencing more and more queen rejection, and that they said it wasn't just their problem, that this was Ontario-wide, and that they've actually had customers that had a colony reject a queen 6 times.
Yeah, but yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But
okay.
Sorry, I shouldn't say that.
I didn't know if this is true.
To make sense of that, but it's not very common for a colony to reject a queen that has been fully accepted by that colony, especially a queen within her first year. Colonies will obviously reject queens as they get older. That's what a supersedure is. Or they might reject the queen if something's happened. So an issue might happen where the queen was overheated, or when she was put into the hive, she got pinched a bit or something, and so they might reject her. And a nuke would have difficulty raising a new queen because they probably don't have eggs or larvae to raise a new one. So I don't know.
Right.
I can't. Yeah, it's too bad they charged you for the other queen. You know, hopefully in the future they would just give you a replacement queen. But I don't know. That's too bad. I'm sorry that
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not totally inexperienced. It was my 5th year beekeeping. So, but
yeah.
you know,
Jen, are you in Toronto? Are you in the
Yeah.
GTA? Yeah, so you can connect with some of us. Graeme isn't, and we can tell you, we have some local orbs breeders that are in Toronto, or they sell in Toronto. And I personally know lots of them who certainly would have accepted responsibility and who would have coached you much better. The only disadvantage of being in a Zoom meeting is I'd say to you, talk to me after the meeting, and we can help you out. Like I said, Graeme, obviously, you know, it's not Graeme's thing to defend poor behavior.
no, I didn't know what the process is.
Yeah, so you could contact me or Lucy or some of us offline, and we can connect you with some people who breed and sell and will deliver in the city of Toronto that we know will fully take responsibility and will really help you out.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, and then just on the point of the queen not being accepted, a queen, like a hive, will repeatedly unaccept queens if they've gone into a situation where they're a drone layer. But that's sort of a whole different situation. That's not what you had. So.
That wasn't the case here.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Next one is, what are your breeding priorities?
Right, okay. Well, so I'm the chair of the orbs program, so obviously I'm breeding for hygienic bees. But what I'm doing alongside of that is breeding for low varroa growth. So doing you know, a type of like a Harbo test for VSH or grooming behavior tests in a lab. I don't have a lab, but what I'm doing is that simple low varroa growth test, like I talked about, that Dr. Guzman, he did the research on to compare them if they correlate, and it is that if a hive expresses that low varroa growth, he correlated to grooming behavior, but you can expand it out to all the other varroa sensitive traits. Also, too, there might be some that we don't know about that we haven't labeled, so that's why that test is so great. So in my breeding program, my top of my list is those two things. And then it would go into honey production and defensive behavior. I'm actually bringing propolis production back into my operation because there's so much research in showing how that's a key part of the overall colony immune system, not just the bee immune system. Dr. Marla Spivak has done a lot of research on that. So I don't have like the buckfast level gentleness of bees, I'll be honest, but I don't breed from any bees that are extremely aggressive. Like I kind of rate them on a scale of 1 to 5. And I don't breed from anything below a 3. So, but yeah, so anyways, it's a lot. I just want bees that survive the winter well, you know, like they survive the winter well, they're dealing with varroa, they're in the top 95% hygienic. The thing is, if you get all those things, they're going to make you a good amount of honey because you have a really healthy beehive. And they're also going to be not necessarily gentle, but if a healthy hive is doing well and making lots of honey, they're not stressed, so they're not defensive. So sometimes you can get a more defensive situation if the hive's diseased. So that's sort of what I'm looking for. So
And you talked about using your hive tool. to
yeah, if you're
uncap
just
it.
just the corner of the hive tool. Yeah.
And then how does uncapping help control brood diseases?
So how does the you mean the freeze kill brood assay? Yeah. So how that hygienic.
I was actually, you referred to the fact that when a bees are uncapping brood that is dead, that's the measure of success in your assays. You're looking for 100%. How does that behavior help control brood diseases? I just wanted to ask the question so that you could explain it to some of the people here who may not be familiar with it.
For sure. So the brood diseases that the hygienic behavior helps is something like a chalk brood or a sac brood, or it can also help with European foul brood and American foul brood. What that test does is so bees are extremely sensitive to a dead larvae, and typically they will remove it. So part of the overall hive's immune system is removing disease from the hive. When we freeze and kill the pupae, the bees have to be very hygienic to go through the process of uncapping and also removing the dead pupae. All that's doing is really simply mimicking the same situation that happens when one of your hives gets chalk brood or sac brood or European foul brood or American foul brood. And what we're testing with that 24 hours waiting and then seeing how much was removed is how quickly of a response do they do to remove it. You want that 24 hour, like 100% uncapped or removed in 24 hours is like the gold standard. I don't believe breed from anything below 95%. So and all that is that's going to really help all of those diseases be under control, because those diseases, depending on which ones they are, they're spore forming or they're bacteria. And so the faster they're out of the hive is the least amount of time that they have to infect other ones. And so you're sort of removing the disease as it's growing, versus if it wasn't removed, in the case of European foul brood, the European foul brood is actually spread by bees that survive European foul brood when they're a larvae. So if they can get all of that European foul brood out, that's great, especially with American foul brood. I'm not saying to not use antibiotics by any means, but I do know, I believe it was Beaver Lodge in Alberta, they actually had hygienic bees, so hygienic that they can introduce heavily infested frames of AFB into them, and the AFB was gone by September. So there is if you can get hygienic bees that also overwinter well, also produce good honey, are not insanely defensive, and then hopefully also too have some ways of dealing with Varroa, that's awesome. So I would definitely recommend at least a hygienic bees.
What is holding the queen in the cage? You mentioned candy. What did you mean?
Oh, okay. So at the end of the cage, there'll be an actual fondant plug. And so the worker bees will chew it out. In the cages I use, the California ones, I didn't bring one today, I'm sorry, but that plug can be taken out. And so once you're installing the nuke, if you want, you can just take the plug out and let the queen walk out. Or you could just take the plug and place the cage in there and she'll come out in a few minutes. Or you could just leave it and the bees will chew the candy away and release it.
What are the pros and cons of feeding a nuke right away?
Well, so pros would be, what's the ratio? I think it takes like 10 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So the bees have to be consuming those calories to produce wax in their wax glands. And so the benefit is that if you introduce a nuke and it's going to rain for a week, there's not a lot blooming right now, that nucleus colony has a very small population and is going to take a long time to go collect all the nectar needed to make that wax. And so if you can feed them just a little bit of 1-to-1 sugar syrup, that's just enough for them to get their wax glands going and produce wax. They'll get they'll build the foundation quicker, the queen will lay out the foundation quicker, and you'll get basically a quicker hive. The risk is if you feed, like I was mentioning, and there's also a nectar flow, and they start jamming all of the cells they're building with honey, then now you're doing what's called like honey bounding the queen, and she doesn't have space to lay. The bees aren't going to sort of set aside an area for the queen and then set aside an area for the honey. If the honey's coming in, they're going to go and get it. That's just their program to do that. So you sort of want to watch out with that. And so that's where I was saying, if you do, that does happen to you, move those full honey frames to the outside and bring new ones in for hopefully the queen to lay on. But I would recommend at least feeding a bit of feed to the first nuke when you get it, for sure.
What was your biggest challenge when beginning your queen rearing operation?
So obviously learning is rearing queens is not the same as beekeeping. I'm actually not too bad at grafting, but grafting can be a big barrier. Grafting is the form of pulling the eggs out of the cell and placing it in the queen cells. Really the hardest thing to do, and everyone will tell you this, is just running your cell builder really well. Your cell builder has to be really strong to feed enough royal jelly to all those new or soon to be queens so that they're nice and big. And you can have all kinds of issues with cell builders like queens getting in or whatever. So it's just really just learning that. And it's also an extremely strict timeline. If it's raining, it doesn't matter. You're still going to go do your queen rearing. It's not like other forms of beekeeping where you can kind of push it. So.
What was your biggest change you made in your first 5 years?
That's a good question. Change in how I kept bees. I guess I don't know totally how to answer that. Well, I will tell you. I will tell you my story of how I started beekeeping. So I quit my job in Toronto because I hated it. I moved home, I made maple syrup, and I needed something else to do that was seasonal. So I decided to get bees. And like I'm sure all new beekeepers, I was going to change the bee world, and everyone's doing it wrong. And it's just this, most new beekeepers have the same similar mindset. Beekeeping is cool because you can kind of do it on your own. So I built a top bar hive, and I caught a bee swarm and I put it in the top bar hive, and I was a beekeeper, and my hive died in December, and I was devastated. And it was like, I was crying. It was like Christmas Day. I found my hive dead. And so I really realized, like, you know what, like maybe all these other people whose bees didn't die know what they're doing. And so, but I still didn't like go take a beekeeping course. I bought some bees. I really learned that bees actually don't love foundation as much as natural comb. I do run quite a bit of natural comb in a lot of my hives. This year you can get a lot of drones, but I guess I then from there just started to do more conventional beekeeping. But that would have been the biggest change, was to just appreciate what people in the past have done, but not be afraid to sort of do your own thing. But at the same time, you know, it's a fine line between following what everyone else has done in the past, recognizing just how much the bee world is changing and sort of new things need to be done too. And so I think just sort of keeping an open mind, but also you're your own beekeeper and you can sort of keep your bees how you like. So actually, biggest thing, this is the biggest thing I did. I changed how I overwinter my bees. Originally I was using tar paper, and I just didn't understand what that did. It does solar energy, I know that, but then I got the Wellington County wraps. Those are great, but they're loose around the hive, and they're really only insulated if there's snow. So I use bee cozies. Bee cozies are great, but then now what I do is I don't buy the bee cozy top insulation. I actually make R14 rock salt pillows, like the insulation that you use to insulate your house. Every single one of my hives gets those. And and it's amazing. In the springtime, if a weak hive's weak, they get through much easier. You'll see they all come up and cluster right at the top against that. And it really, really, really reduces how much feed they go through. It's just Yeah, so that would be the biggest thing, is just really packing them with that. I really like that.
And
So,
it's in your hive, not on top of the hive. You're wrong.
no, it's on top of the hive, and I either put an empty medium super or a 3.5-inch rinse spacer. Yeah, yeah, so it's on top of the inner cover, but below the outer cover.
Is there any future research or technology you are excited for?
Yeah, actually, I have some isolated bee yards up north that I breed queens in, and also Tech Transfer uses those as test control groups. So they're doing a cool one. I won't say too much because I know they're not done, but they were comparing the issues with mite infestations from other beekeepers. And so they used my yard as a control group because there's no other bees, so only my bees. So they measured the mite growth in all the hives there. And then they did the same thing to bee yards down in Guelph. And that's all I say. I'm not going to tell their data or whatever. I'm sure that'll come out in the spring meeting. I know they're working on it now, but I will say my yard up north that was isolated was actually still not at treatment threshold a year and a half from its last mite treatment. And so it really seems like if you knock down all the mites in your yard and you have bees that do sort of deal with them, they're much easier to deal with than being in an area where you might get kind of mite bombed. Yeah. So they're sort of testing that.
Why do you prefer oxalic dribble over oxalic vaporization?
Oh, that's a good question. In my opinion, there hasn't really been enough research done on oxalic acid, and I do the dribble. So I guess it depends on what way you're applying the vaporization. If you're using it as your main mite treatment, I know one of the companies that sells the mite or the vaporizer says to do it like every 5 days, or 5 times for every 5 days. The issue with oxalic acid is it actually builds up in the bee system, and it can create crystals and they can't go to the washroom. And I know, and I just don't know enough. I know there's a YouTube video somewhere of a beekeeper in Canada that did a lot of research on it and found that sometimes you're probably giving them way too much oxalic acid and actually lowering the chances of them surviving the winter because they have those crystals built up. I prefer the dribble because it's literally just a final little cleanup of any mites that might be left in there before the winter. And so I just throw it on and it's going to clean up whatever's on their back. But at that point in time, when I'm using it, they're totally broodless. So I'm not having to do that like five weeks or five treatments over the course of whatever that is, like every 5 days. And if you're doing that, you're letting the bees hatch out with the mites and then trying to kill the phoretic ones. I just honestly think that you're pounding them with a little bit too much oxalic acid, but that's my own personal opinion. And
Could you share the link or a name of the articles that relate to the importance of propolis? This sounds intriguing.
sure, I will send that to Lucy, and she can send it out. But if you're interested, it's just Marla Spivak. She does the Minnesota Bee Lab, and she's been doing all kinds of research on it with some of her graduate students. And it seems like it's basically we bred propolis production out of bees because it makes them easier to work. And in doing that, we potentially maybe have removed some of the general hive immunity or immune system. And so bringing that back in is so.
Lucy, do you remember what month and year Marla Spivak came? Because you may actually find that she actually presented on that information to our group during COVID. And
She
it's
was.
on the YouTube, and it may be on our YouTube channel if Lucy can come up with the month and year that she came. But anyways, thank you very much.
Are there any more questions? Okay, we're going to do the demonstration.
Okay, I'll keep this quick because actually, are we over time? Okay, so basically, where am I here? Everyone can hear me? See me? Okay, cool. So So this is a nuke box. This is a cardboard one. In Ontario, you might also find a wood one or a plastic one, but this is just like a box, just like what you would get your bees in. There's no entrance open. If they're made up a few days in advance, the beekeeper may have opened it and taped it. But what you can see is on top here screen. So if this was filled with bees, this is so that they can ventilate, like I was saying. They might overheat or not have enough heat depending on the temperature. But what you want to do is when you lift the nuke box, you want to lift from the ends or lift from the bottom, never from the sides like this, because you're going to crush bees that are all on the side of the boxes here. So you can see in here, this is what your frames would look like. So if you grab the ends, it's not a big deal, but if you push in on the sides, you're going to squish a bunch of bees. And more importantly, if your queen's not caged, that's going to be where she might be. So never ever do that. Just always pick a nuke up like this. So it's going to be all taped up when you get it. If it's going in your car, if someone comes and buys a nuke from me and it's going right in their car, I'll just tape the edges up for them. They actually sell little like screen baggies you can also get, but if it's taped up, it should be fine. So you're going to bring your nuke home and let it rest for a little bit, and then you're going to open up your beehive. So I have a bottom board, you can't see it underneath there, but there's the hive, and I've removed 4 frames. So 4 frames are out of here. I'm going to actually, I run 10 frame hive, so I'm going to have 3 on this side and 3 on this side. And so what you're going to do is you're going to open up your bees. You might want to puff a bit of smoke in here with your smoker, then you're going to open them up. And chances are some are going to fly out, but a lot of them are just going to be sitting in here. So if there's any bees in your lid, you can just like tap your lid like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your queen out, and you're going to take your queen cage out and place her in the shade. I always like to place her in the shade right behind my hive. And then you're going to start to take your frames out of the nuke and put them into the box. And how they should be organized, I wrote on these while we were sitting here in the meeting, but it should be a honey frame, or it probably is, I shouldn't say should be, but it likely is a honey frame and pollen on the outside. And the next 2 frames are going to be active brood, so capped brood or mostly capped brood and larvae. And then your empty frame. And this is actually likely what you're going to see. This is one of my frames. This will go into a nuke this year. It's just an extracted deep frame. So it's already drawn for the bees. So what you're going to do is take that out, put it in, and take out your brood, 2 brood frames. The most important thing with this is the 2 brood frames need to be side by side. If you separate them right off the bat, and it's beginning of June and there's a cold spell, the bees are going to have to neglect one of them, and you're going to have brood loss. So you want to make sure that the brood is right in the middle. And I like to just place that honey pollen frame right in there as well. So the middle 4 frames here are your are the frames from your nuke. So you got your honey pollen, your 2 brood frames, and your space delay. If your queen is caged, you're going to put her right in the middle between the 2 brood frames. And I like to place her right here towards the back, so that if I do put a feeder on, no sugar syrups dripping down onto her. If at this point in time you like have another beekeeper helping you, they put nukes in before, you can actually release the queen. I often do that unless I'm making my own nukes and introducing my own new queens into them. Then obviously you need to leave the queen cage. But if it's a purchase nuke and the queen's accepted, you can release her there as well. And then what you're going to do is just put your inner cover on. So in the summer, I run all my inner covers notch up, and then you're going to put your feeder on. So if you have one of these feeder pails, you can do that. There's other ways to feed as well, but you're just going to put that on upside down, and the sugar syrup's going to come out of there. In the beginning, it's going to drip. And so that's why I was saying you want to make sure you can't look through here and see the queen, because you don't want to drown her with sugar syrup. So that can go on, and then your outer cover literally just goes on top of it. If you want, in 10 days, when you come back, and they are already starting to build. So you can see this, this was super late in the year that they had started to build that. You want to see that they're starting to do that. If they've already built a frame and they've already started to put nectar in it, or sorry, if they've already built a frame and they've already started to put brood in it, this may not be on your next trip, but the one after. What I like to do is I like to take that honey and pollen frame that I got. If it's broodless, if there's no brood, if it was truly just full of food and honey, I honestly like to just move that to the outside. And I'm gonna move in frames that they've got brood already going on, especially if these brood frames, I know I showed a photo of an image that was just wall-to-wall brood, but these often will have some food and pollen on them on the outsides. And so by this point in time, 10 days or 20 days, probably after you've installed it, you can start to sort of fiddle around with the frames. Don't forget, these are gonna say, all of mine say 22 except this one, but if you do it this year, these will say 23 on the back here. And so you want to remember, you want those ones closer to the middle and your older frames getting to the outside so you can remove them. Yeah, so I guess that makes sense, and I'll answer any questions if anyone has any more.
Question, you had mentioned about the importance of temperature and
Yeah.
maybe not leaving the nuke outside if it's
Yes.
cool. At what temperature is it fine to do so? Like what would it?
I think like I wouldn't go below 12 degrees, which is like the temperature you start clustering on.
So a nighttime low below 12 is too cold.
I think below 12 isn't great. Don't put it in somewhere that's 25. Like you have like a garage that's like 18 degrees, that's probably perfect. They can overheat as well. And if you are going to leave them for, if you like have to leave them for a bit, you could also put a little bit of water on the screen, and that'll help them cool themselves when they need to.
Patrick has put in the chat for anybody who wants it, the article from Marla on the publics. You can take a look at that. And everybody's just thanking you very much for all of this really great information. It was really.
And you had asked me a question about single versus double, right?
Yeah, I got a question, but that's fine.
Okay, so a single versus a double brood chamber is pretty simple. One box like this is a single. So the brood chamber is where the queen is contained and lays the eggs and the babies. So if you're running a single, it'll be this box with a queen excluder on top, and then the boxes above are where we take the honey from. If you're running a double, you're going to have two of these that the queen has free range to move through. And that was always the industry standard for a long, long time. Things are changing and more people are shifting to a single brood chamber. I run my entire operation single with bees. I'm near Barrie, but I have bees all the way up to near North Bay, and they also die like they survive like 100%. So it's not like there's not an issue. They can do it. So yeah.
What's a mite wash?
So a mite wash is a way of sampling your hive to see how many mites are in it. And I can, I'll play the video for you on my computer after if you want to see it. You can watch it.
I think we are done the meeting for today. We have our meeting set up for February. We have Marion, of course, with her beekeeping calendar. Be educated. We have an apiary tour with one of our members, Damian Madalena. And our main speaker for February is Vicki Wojcik, and she's the Director of Pollinator Partnership of Canada. And she's going to be talking about bee interactions, so native and honeybee interactions, positive, negative, and neutral interactions that they have with each other. And so that'll be for February. So hopefully we'll see you all then. Thank you for coming.
Where do urban